to love and support the children of this world in, I hope, meaningful ways. In my professional life, I managed numerous mental health programs for children, in-home clinical supports, foster care for those whose birth parents could not care for them, support for adoptive families, developmental day services for children with severe physical and mental disabilities, to name a few. Marian Wright Edelman, who is the founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund, who's now in her 80s, continues to write meditations and prayers to inspire the teachers, parents, grandparents, community leaders, and others who must continue to work for justice and love for all children. In 2016, she wrote, "This has been a trying year for so many children in America, confused, consumed by, and afraid of the intolerance, hatred, and anger of adults. How do we keep the promises we have made to our children? How do we make a better America that values each and every child, regardless of skin color, faith, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or immigration status? How do we remind our political leaders with unwavering clarity that every child is sacred and that God did not make two classes of children? This is not a time to weep. This is a time for work to ensure justice." Of course, she had no idea that a worldwide pandemic would have such additional devastating effects on children beginning in 2020, robbing many of them of 2 years in school, the loss of parents and other close relatives to COVID, hunger because they depended on school for 2 meals every day, soaring anxiety and depression due to isolation and uncertainty. Some social scientists are now predicting that these losses, especially the educational losses, will change forever the trajectory of their lives for that generation, will reduce success in all life endeavors, financial, social, and others. But what did we learn from the pandemic? One, very important, that modest financial supports for the poorest families can lift millions of children out of poverty. We learned that schools provided so much more than education for children. We learned about the resiliency of some and the fragility of many other children. We learned that all children need access to basic medical care, and the absence of medical care makes all of us more vulnerable. As we readjust to a new normal, what are the concerns and priorities for children and young people going forward? I talk about them all the time. My 2 granddaughters, aged 18 and 19, are very focused on climate change, violence in the schools and other public places, gun safety. They are accepting of their peers who are different races, sexual orientations, and body types. They actually use a different language that doesn't categorize or differentiate others or assign labels. They're politically active, have already traveled extensively, and use social media to connect to every part of the world. They listen to and respect their older family members far more than I did at their age. They don't understand why we are not further along in our efforts to combat climate change, and they think we have focused on the wrong methodology. At the end of my career, I was setting up a grant to support families who had adopted children out of the foster care system. Obviously, children who had experienced many hardships. And I read extensively about resiliency, and that research was fascinating. A major conclusion is that children can learn to cope with, adapt to, and recover from the challenges caused by trauma. The key ingredients to building resilience and helping young people succeed are caring relationships, high expectations, opportunities to participate and contribute. Furthermore, for many children, the presence of just one adult, a teacher, coach, foster parent, minister, one person who can be a long-term influence and support can make the difference for that child. Unitarian Universalists honor the worth and dignity of all people, and how we care for children is a major component of that principle. I'd like to challenge this congregation. What can UCF provide for the children of Carteret County that may make a difference in their lives? Every day we hear more statistics about the need for intensive tutoring for school children who have lost significant skills due to the pandemic. And of course, the shortage of teachers will make it difficult for schools to provide this extra support for children. As younger congregants, families, and the retired, let us think outside the box, talk to each other and education professionals in our community. Our commitment to justice and compassion requires us to uplift and value all children. We have much to offer.
Thank you, Mariana. I do believe that we have much to offer, and I want to thank Mariana for that challenge to the congregation. What can we do for the children of Carteret County? Mariana brings up some great possibilities like after-school tutoring, programs to counteract learning loss, addressing food insecurity, access to basic healthcare. And there are spiritual needs as well, that the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship can address. As Mariana said, sometimes the presence of one person is enough. One adult who can be a long-term source of support and affirmation. I see a lot of adults in this room who I think fit that bill. So the idea for today's sermon arose out of something I read a long time ago, that the Maasai in Africa traditionally greet one another by asking, "How are the children?" And the expected traditional answer would be, "All the children are well." The idea being that if all the children are well, then life is good, right? You got your basics taken care of. You've got food, shelter, the kids are safe, everything's good. And kind of wonder, what would it be like if that was how we greeted each other on a regular basis, right? If all the time we were asking each other, "Hey, how are the kids?" So how are the children? How are they doing spiritually, emotionally, physically? For the purposes of my message today, I'll actually be talking mostly about Gen Z, because that's the generation for which we have the most data right now. So those are people who were born after 1996, although I may also bring up millennials now and then who were born after 1981, but before 1996. For context, I am what is considered an elder millennial. That's right, I am an elder now. So who is Gen Z? Well, Gen Z grew up more or less with the internet. Gen Z does not remember a world with payphones or where you looked up movie showtimes in a physical newspaper. Gen Z grew up with the expectation that their internet use would be monitored, not necessarily by their parents, maybe so, but also by the government and by corporations. Gen Z makes jokes that start with, "Dear FBI agent who monitors my internet usage." Gen Z has never had a lot of control over their social media experience. I remember early iterations of social media where I could actually curate what was shown to me and I could control what was shown to other people. Gen Z has never had that. Gen Z talks to an algorithm. They know that everything is powered by algorithms that are designed to stoke outrage and drive traffic and clicks and therefore advertising eyeballs. Gen Z knows how little control they individually have over anything in this world. Gen Z grew up, seemingly, amidst one crisis after another. Start elementary school, boom, 9/11. Start middle or high school, bam, the Great Recession. As Gen Z was looking forward to starting or graduating college, hello, COVID-19 pandemic, maybe you heard about that. Gen Z grew up with active shooter drills and the specter of climate change. If you don't understand Gen Z's sense of humor, it's because you haven't yet been able to tap into the vein of nihilism that comes from growing up hearing that the world is going to end within your lifetime and also that you might die any day now. Gen Z does not have the luxury of assuming that the future is at all a certainty. That might explain why Gen Z is, according to a study from the American Psychological Association, the least likely generation to report fair or excellent mental health. And more than a third of Gen Z reported that their mental health worsened during the pandemic. And according to that same American Psychological Association survey, almost 40% of Gen Z has sought help from a mental health professional, higher than any previous generation, because Gen Z is normalizing going to therapy. Gen Z has not given up. And according to Pew Research, Gen Z is also the most well-educated generation yet. Almost 60% of them are in college. Also, according to Pew Research, Gen Z is also the most racially and ethnically diverse generation yet. A bare majority, 52%, is non-Hispanic white. A quarter of Gen Z is Hispanic, 14% are Black, 6% are Asian, and 5% are from some other race or two or more races. That is up from 3% of millennials who are some other race or two or more races, by the way. It's no surprise then that Gen Z agrees with millennials that increasing racial and ethnic diversity is good for society and that Black people are not treated fairly in this country. Fully 70% of Gen Z believes that the government should be in the business of solving problems, such as climate change, which over 50% of Gen Z believes is caused by human activity. Gen Z, perhaps because they're more globally connected than previous generations, believes that while the USA is one of the best countries in the world, it is not the best. Gen Z is also at the forefront of changing ideas about gender in this country. Over a third of Gen Z say that they know someone who goes by gender neutral pronouns, such as they, them, and 60% of them think that forms and official documents should have options other than male and female on them. Not surprisingly, a recent Gallup poll found that 20% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ+. So that was a lot of statistics. What does it boil down to? How are the children? The children are anxious and depressed. The children are well educated. The children are queer AF. The children are increasingly multiracial. And the children are changing the world. I think Mariana has experienced that Gen Z is not afraid to show up and tell you what they think. Gen Z is demanding to know what companies are doing about racial justice, climate change, mental health, civil rights. It was members of Gen Z that organized the March for Our Lives against gun violence after the shooting at Marjory Stoneman High School in 2018. It's Gen Z that's at the forefront of addressing climate change. May I remind you that Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist, is 19 years old, and the Sunrise Movement is entirely youth-led. 23-year-old Pakistani activist Malala kicked off a feminist movement in the Middle East just by blogging. So what can we do for the children? Well, honestly, part of me just kind of wants to get out of the way. Seems like you're doing fine. In fact, why don't you tell me what to do? What kind of support do you need? Do you need drinks? Do you need snacks? Do you need a building to meet in? Do you need me to sign a petition? Do you need me to come to a protest or a rally? Do you need me to give you a ride home after a protest or a rally? Here's my phone number. I am here to help because I want you to have the future that you deserve. It is the future that we all deserve. You know, it seems to me, based on these statistics, that Gen Z is the Unitarian Universalist generation. Gen Z believes in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That's why they're so passionate about racial and economic justice. Gen Z acknowledges the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. So they acknowledge the human element in climate change and are working to combat it. So what can we do to support the children? Well, we can make sure that they're fed and clothed and housed, of course. Those are the basic necessities that everyone needs. We can also support racial justice and equity because supporting people of color means supporting our increasingly diverse and multiracial children. We can support LGBTQ rights because that means supporting our increasingly queer children. We can support healthcare for all, especially mental health care, so that our increasingly anxious and depressed children can access it when they need it. We can address gun violence so that our children can focus on school when they're at school. We can, in short, do what our children, like Mary Anna's grandchildren, are already doing. They are asking us to join with them. And as Mary Anna reminded us, sometimes it takes just one person. One long-term source of care and support can make the world of difference for someone who might otherwise not have that support. There's a saying often that children are our future. I'd like to remind everyone that they are also our present. They are already here. They are already trying to tell us something. They are waiting for us to hear them. May it be so. And as we enter into our space of quiet contemplation today, which you of course are free to use however